I saw my other friends who I walked in, and we've been investigating this road-on program for the past 5 years. And we have filed a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice, Eric Holder's office, and he have turned this complaint over to the fraud section and criminal division of the U.S. Department of Justice. I'm quite sure a number of you are not even aware. Since Katrina, over $49 billion has been appropriated by the U.S. Congress, HUD, and FEMA. And the fraud section of the Justice Department turned the complaint over to the FBI at 2901 Leon C. Simon Drive near Suno. I met with the FBI a couple of times regarding the complaint. Also, we sent a letter to David A. Montoya, Director, Office of Inspector General, U.S. Department of Justice. We also sent a letter to Craig Fugate, Director of FEMA. He's the Executive Director. And Sean Donovan, Secretary of HUD. The reason we sent the letters, as you travel throughout New Orleans when you're going to Lower Ninth Ward, to Zion, Florida, and parts of Pontchartrain Park, it looked like a disaster zone. You're talking about $49 billion. Take a look at our neighborhoods. I question where all this money is going. They have a slick scheme going in this city. It's keeping information from the general public. What greatly concerns me is that blacks cannot get money from contracting because what they're doing is bringing in guest workers, which I will address later. I kept this article here, but it says, slaves honored for erecting the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. If you've been to Jackson, Mississippi, you can see that slaves built the City Hall there. But in the history of the Arlington Parish School Board, you have never had an African-American build a school or do a major renovation job because they have been systematically excluded during the construction work. Here's the contract that Sandra and a couple of us were able to obtain. A company out of Pasadena, California called Jacobs/CSRS. When this contract was signed, it was worth $18 million. The person who signed this contract was to serve as a project manager of building 25 new schools, refurbishing schools, or renovating schools. They come to a grand total of 75 schools they're going to work on. But what really gets me is that FEMA appropriated $2 billion to build new schools. As of today, they have built 9 brand new schools. The RSD school district and the Arlington Parish School Board did not use one black general contractor or not one black subcontractor. Let me just give you the name of the schools I'm talking about. L.B. Landry, $56 million. Lake Erie School on Paris Avenue. Lower School out of New Orleans on Wales Street. Fannie C. Williams on Bullard. Hines School on Harrison Avenue. Langston Hughes Elementary on Trafalgar. Mildred Osmond on Martin Drive. Morris Jeff on Partner Street. And Parkview near Mirabeau out in Gentilly. And just to think about all this money building new schools. What this company has done called Jacobs Engineering or Jacobs CSRS, they are bringing in contractors from out of state to build schools in New Orleans. Now let's like to remind you, when this guy signed this contract, it was $18 million. He'd been able to get 4 change orders, which come to a grand total of $28 million. If an African American in New Orleans got a contract like this and got 4 change orders, You have Medicams and the Times picking you on sleeping on the steps. But merely because this is a white contractor, they believe white make right in this city. Now, I'm quite sure you remember about the disposal in Metro when he got a garbage contract. Everybody knew about those two contracts. They were very small contracts. But this guy from Pasadena, California, can get a $28 million contract and never make any major newspaper or television station. Let me tell you what they're doing in this city, why Rice cannot get work. I was in Atlanta, Georgia. Many steel workers came back to New Orleans, and they could not get work. Many of them came back to Atlanta. I was in Atlanta for 4.5 years. This is an investigation by the Southern Poverty Law Center called Close to Slavery. What the white general contractors are doing is using guest workers. You remember under the George Bush and Dick Cheney administration, there was a law passed calling for bringing in guest workers from South America, Central America, and Mexico. They brought in 121,000 to clean up New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. Many of those folks they brought in here are craftsmen. So what they're doing is paying them to do craftsmen's work. It takes 11 craftsmen to build a new school. So they bringing in skilled workers from out of South America, Central America, and Mexico. So what this doing is knocking out local people from work. What's the game behind this? If I hired Brother Larry Smith, and he's an expert brake player, and he's a U.S. citizen, they would have to pay Brother Larry Smith the prevailing wage, which is about $24 an hour. Am I right, Larry? They bring in a craftsman from South America, Central America, and Mexico. They pay him $10 an hour. And all federal contracts have prevailing wage in those contracts. There's another trick to that. Under U.S. Department of Labor, Executive Order 246, it says that any company that receives a contract with federal money, which the money is coming from FEMA, you must maintain affirmative action and a non-discriminatory policy. What's going on is that the contractor gets the contract, he's not adhering to the U.S. Department of Labor Executive Order 11246. So they get over like a fat rat in a cheese factory, where you can pay for slave wages. Also, too, let's talk about hard carriers. You know, a lot of folks came in here, you saw a lot of Hispanics gutting buildings, taking out sheetrock, hauling trash. That work is called hard carrier work. If you read this document by the Southern Poverty Law Center, they was paying those guest workers $3 and $4 an hour. If I'd have hired my nephew, Larry Pitts, there, we have to pay him $10.50 an hour. But the prevailing wages are in those contracts. So this is what's happening in this city. And the news meeting in New Orleans is quieter than the night before Christmas. They're not trying to expose this because white folks are making big bucks. And I'm seriously concerned about that. What really gets my goat is that all the money that's going to build these schools are coming from FEMA. Now, let me just show you this. Back in the statement on Project area where I grew up at, they tore down Phillip Elementary School, not Phillip Middle School, and Maurice Water Elementary School. They want to build a $50 million school back there, built with federal money, and put John McDonough's name on it. Call it McDonough 35. John McDonough was the largest slave owner in the history of North America. He owned over 1,800 slaves. He made babies by slave women, put them on a boat and shipped them to West Africa. They didn't ship them back to Africa. They weren't born in Africa. They were from concubine relationships. They organized a colony called Liberia. I've been to Monrovia, Liberia. In fact, I've been to Africa 9 times. If you go to the public library, the names are in the library of his offspring. And when he first came from Maryland, he ran a brothel on Charter Street, where he bought young girls for $1 a pound and sold them into prostitution for concubines. And yet you're going to put this kind of name on the school in the heart of the black community. So I'm concerned about the fact we're not upset about that. I'm going to ask you a question. Would a Jew send his kid to a school named after Adolf Hitler? If 5 million Jews represent a Holocaust, what does 35 million lives represent that was lost in the Middle Passage? So we can talk about the Jewish Holocaust, but who's going to talk about the African Holocaust? I think it's a sin for anybody to put a school in the heart of an African-American community named after the largest slave owner in the history of North America. Where I got involved in this effort renaming schools, McDonough 35 band was in Demington Parade. And I was at the parade and a group of white tourists asked the folks around them, was the school named after John McDonough? And somebody in the audience said yes. And they bust out and started laughing. They thought this was the funniest thing they ever seen in their life. An all-black band wearing a uniform with the name on it of the largest slave owner in the history of North America. We picked up the school board and got them to adopt a policy to rename schools named after slave owners. In our research, we found out of 117 schools, 51 was named after slave owners. There's no state. In fact, we had a Thurgood Marshall on Canal Street. Somehow the name disappeared. We had a Ronald McNair over on Carrollton Avenue. Prior to that, the school was named Robert Lee, a general in the Confederate Army. It was named to Robert McNair. The school on Canal Street was named after P.G.T. Beauregard, the man who fired the shot and started the Civil War, who was from Savon on Parish, who was a slave owner. But yet they want to take Thurgood Marshall's name off the school, the first U.S. Supreme Court judge. But they want to keep John McDonough on the school in the black neighborhood. So we're not going to take up too much of your time because we want to hear from you. Because we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Thank you.